Hello booktube, this is Lindy. Welcome to the second half of my weekly reads. I did a Friday reads yesterday with 5 books, and I've got another 5 today, my Saturday reads. One of the things that I didn't mention yesterday when I talked about the Glass Bookshop book club is that the pick for August is Acts of Service by Lillian Fishman, I think is the author. I'll put the information in the notes. Have any of you read this? When I picked it up in the bookshop and had a look through what it's about and stuff, it really did not appeal to me. So I'm curious. If any of you have read it? Joni? Joni? She gets a little worked up about birds being in her trees. There's lots of magpies around, as you can hear. Yeah, so anyway, Acts of Service, I think I'm going to give it a miss. Let me know if I'm making a mistake, all right? Next up, and what I read last week, is this collection of essays. This Has Always Been a War. And it's by a non-binary journalist, Lori Fox, who lives in Whitehorse with her dog Herman. They've been employed as a server, fruit picker, lots of manual labor type jobs like that. And their approach to how to change our capitalist system, what they call our capitalist culture, is burn it all down. There's a lot of wrath in here, a lot of strong opinions. I don't know, maybe I'm too old now for anarchy. I'm not sure. But I certainly found the writing compelling. They have a story about when they were working as a server in Ottawa, and a customer reached under their skirt and grabbed them by the pussy. And it's just an illustration of how workers in situations like that are treated as property. And I could really relate. When I was 16, I worked as a waitress at a pizza place. And there was a time when it was busy. A group of young guys came in and sat down at a large table, big round table, so there were probably 5 or 6 of them, and it hadn't been cleared yet. So I was bussing it, wiping the table down, and as I leaned across to do that, one of these guys bit me on the ass. And I swung around and knocked his glasses off his face. What Fox does in her situation is dumps the pitcher of beer she was bringing to the table on his head. Yeah, I can totally relate. They also have an essay talking about mental illness, their own, and how poverty makes it a cycle that's really hard to get out of, because it's hard to access mental health services unless you have the money to pay for it. Free services are sometimes by people who aren't qualified, don't do a good job at it. Having mental health issues makes it difficult to get a good paying job, you know, all of that vicious cycle that is quite well portrayed in here. They talk about fruit picking in the Okanagan, and you know what, just kind of like a day-to-day life and what it's like. The difficulties, like for example, of finding somewhere that workers can afford to stay. Even a campsite is somewhere from $30 to $50 a night. And it's, you know, against the law to sleep in your car in, you know, the village where the work is. So yeah, many difficulties. The chapter that I want to focus on is called Where the Fuck Are We in Your Dystopia? And because Laurie Fox spent a lot of time in their vehicle, traveling from city to city and across long distances, they would have, big dramatic breakups and then go from Yukon to Quebec and then back again, that sort of thing. As well as following work and not being able to stay in places where it was too cold to live in their truck, camper, that kind of thing. Well, they take advantage of writing about dystopias to really bash Margaret Atwood. So here's an example. If I could, I'd feed the wood stove in my cabin exclusively with secondhand copies of The Deathly Hallows, Dave Chappelle Headshots, and yard sale Margaret Atwood novels. The only way to draw warmth from the latter's lifeless prose would be to burn it. And then there's another place. Atwood is not only a bad feminist, but a big old unapologetic TERF. Despite whatever protestations she might make to the contrary, the proof is in the rich old white lady pudding. With that said, I don't mean to detract from Atwood's work, which I personally think has about the color and personality as an old plastic bag. She has her fans, though her work clearly isn't for me. I vote for the much more talented and good-hearted Alice Munro to usurp Atwood as Canada's literary queen. Yeah. So yeah, tell us what you really think. I think Atwood could take it, but it does seem a little extreme to me. Anyway, in this chapter, she gives examples of feminist dystopias. She puts feminists in quotation marks and takes these cis-het white feminists to task for not including queer and gender non-conforming and people of color and disabled and working class characters. And the examples she gives are that type of work, but I immediately thought of 10 feminist dystopias that did include queer and or people of color and or people with disabilities. And those are Words in My Heart by Asphyxia, Gutter Child by Jael Richardson, Crosshairs by Catherine Hernandez, The Queue by Basma Abdel Aziz, An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon, Bitch Planet by Kelly Sue McConaughey, Black Wave by Michelle T., Woman World by Aminder Dalawal, and Tiger Flu by Larissa Lai. And later on in this chapter, she does come around to mentioning that Tiger Flu is a good book. Yeah. Anyway, in talking about the book Vox, honey, trust me, if you're going to take down a fascist regime, you're going to want to call the butches in too. They've got the best boots for the job. So I find they're a good raconteur, and this radicalization of a working class queer, which is the subtitle, aptly describes what's going on in this book. Oh, one more thing. Laurie Fox mentions Tim Hortons in one of these essays, so another excerpt from my collection. And so does John Claytor in his memoir in graphic format, which is the next book I want to tell you about. I had to return my copy to the library. So I'll include sort of a flip through so you can see what I'm talking about for his style of art. As I tell you, what it is a cross-country trip starting in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and right across Canada to the west coast of BC to Prince Rupert, where he has an artist residency, and then traveling back again. He's writing about alcohol addiction and staying sober and coming to terms with what his addiction has meant for the people that he cares about, and what it means to live a good life, really. There are some really funny passages where he, sees animals alongside the road, like a pair of wolves crossing the highway when he's in Northern Ontario. And then he invents a conversation between them. He invents conversations between porcupines and ducks and flowers. And that really adds a nice lightness to a serious topic. I love his really loose, expressive line. He drew on a tablet to create these images, and it's all hand lettered. That can look a little chaotic as flipping through it, but once you're focusing on page by page, it's very easy to read. So I do highly recommend Take the Long Way Home by John Claytor. Next up is a book I read in ebook format. And when I started reading this, I didn't have an iPad. And so I was reading it on my phone, and it was very slow going. I don't think it was the content of the novel. The Honeymoon Festival by Marian Engel is the book I'm talking about. And it's a very stream of consciousness tale that is really one evening and night and early morning in the life of a woman in, I think it's set in the 70s, in an old house in Toronto, a house that's mildewy and falling apart, full of insects. She's got several children and very pregnant with another one on the way, and her inner monologue is extremely entertaining, sometimes confusing. I picked this up thanks to Sean the Book Maniac, who's working his way through Marian Engel's books. So I'm grateful to him for that, because I don't think I would have read this otherwise, even though I loved her book, Bear. Yeah, that's all I can think to say about it right now. I know that Sean is going to be putting up a video where he's talking about it with some other readers, and I look forward to that, because I think there's lots more to ruminate about this particular novel. And I can also thank Sean the Book Maniac for this next book, which I listened to in audio, Sean reading it out loud over Voxer, and that is a New Zealand novel called Greta and Valdin by Rebecca Reilly. This is about a pair of siblings in their 20s in contemporary Auckland, and the dialogue, the chapters mostly alternate between these two, and they're both queer. The dialogue is fantastic, so funny. They've got this giant rambling family, a mix of Russian and Catalan and Maori ethnic backgrounds. Other members of the family are also queer. There's just so much stuff going on, and I've just found it so enjoyable. And I'm not surprised to learn that this book won a first novel award. I think it's called the Occam Awards, the New Zealand Book Awards, and in the first novel category, it came in first. And last up, I picked up Small Things Like These by Keegan. I have been meaning to read this since last fall. I'm sure you've heard of it, very popular book, promoted as a heartwarming Christmas story. That aspect of it is not what drew me in. It's set in Ireland in the 1980s, and it features the Magdalene Laundries, nuns who provided a home for unwed mothers, but really it was exploiting the labor of these young women who didn't have any other options. I found it a really moving story, and I had made a note of the fact that Ali Smith recommended it, and anything that she recommends, I'm going to pay attention to. And then more recently, it made the long list of the Booker. When that long list came out, I hadn't read any of the titles, although I was familiar with some of them, like Small Things Like These, and I immediately checked out an audiobook edition. It's read by Aidan Kelly. It's 2 hours. I was totally enraptured. I listened while I worked on a natural dye printing project. If I can show you some of the pieces that I made. And speaking of dyeing, this top that I'm wearing is actually done with sun imprints on plants from my garden. I have a photo I can pop in to give you a better look at it. It's an old linen blouse that I'd had in my closet for years and hadn't been wearing it, but now that I've got it dyed, I love wearing it. So I'm totally distracted. What I wanted to say is I am influenced so much by you people on booktube and what you're reading, and I can give you concrete examples in addition to what I've just said about Sean and the Claire Keegan book, which Fraser Simons and Shelley Swearingen talked about in their reaction to the Booker long list. I checked out Earth Eater by Dolores Reyes, translated by Julia Sanchez, because Anna Novella talked about it in one of her videos. And hey, it's Woman in Translation Month starting next week. So, even though I think every month is Women in Translation Month, I still like to participate when everyone else is doing it, so I can kind of join in on the conversation. Roz of Scallydandling About the Books talked about K. Tempest, so I dug out my copy of Let Them Eat Chaos so I can reread it. This is a book that I picked up at Shakespeare and Company. I love it. It's got a sticker and it won a Costa Award 2016, and I look forward to rereading that this week. I'm also going to be doing a buddy read with Marilyn Maya Mendoza starting next week of a Cora Sandell novel, Alberta and Freedom. That is the second in a trilogy, and I haven't read the first one. And Sean's initial reaction when he heard that, both of us heard about Cora Sandell from Sean, by the way. Anyway, so Sean's reaction was, start with the first one. And then he said, well, except for Lindy. You like to read things back to front and starting in the middle, so go ahead and do what you want. Thanks, Sean. What else? Oh, I also started listening to Agatha of Little Neon, and I can thank Greg of Supposedly Fun for that. Thank you to all you booktubers and commenters. Always happy to hear from you, and I enjoy watching your videos. So I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.